Soundgate branded car audio and mobile electronics products. In 1980, Steve developed the original Kicker, which launched a car audio brand with hundreds of models sold through a network of retail dealers in all 50 U.S. states and more than 60 countries on 6 continents. The final member of our panel is Mr. Jack Allen, founder of CFR Insurance and graduated from Oklahoma State University School of Business. He has also taught in the OSU Tulsa MBA program. He was voted one of the 25 most innovative agents in the country, and his company has won Best Place to Work in Oklahoma and Marketing Agency of the Year. So please help me in welcoming our panel for tonight.
Okay, what I'd like to do first is ask each of our entrepreneurs in turn to take a few minutes, as long as you'd like, but talk a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey and maybe how it connects to the dilemma of the night. Do you want to go first?
Sure. Everybody here, is that do we have to project or anything?
Can you all hear?
Yes.
Okay. So, my story is I got started. I started working at a stationery store. A lot of people ask what I do. That's one of the things. Is it Mandy? Right? Mandy asked me. So on the surface, we're a stationery company. Underneath, we are a commercial printer and a technology company. And the whole story behind that is I started working at a stationery store when I was 15 years old. Which I don't think you're supposed to legally work when you're 15, but I did. And I learned entrepreneurship from the guy who hired me at 15. So I don't know what that says about my entrepreneurial training because I learned everything I knew from him. But I worked there all the way through high school and college, went to OSU. My senior year, I actually drove back to Oklahoma City to work at that store on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. Graduated in 01, moved to Dallas. And then September 11th happened that year, and the bottom fell out of, I was an interior design major trying to get into interior design. Nobody was purchasing interior design services right after September 11th. So I moved back to Oklahoma City, moved in with my parents, and started working at the stationery store again. Couldn't get away from it. And I think one of the interesting things about being an entrepreneur is I had the guidance of my boss at that store to really give me insight into what an entrepreneur's life was like and what risks you had to take to be an entrepreneur. And I also, in terms of managing a team, saw his ability to recognize different strengths in me. And he saw that I could draw, and he said, you should, I was doing custom invitations for people at the store, and then a few people, I was also babysitting a ton, because you can't make a living working at a stationery store. And he said, you need to start a wholesale stationery company. I was living with my parents, so I had absolutely nothing to lose at that point in the game. I mean, I had a college degree and nothing going for me at the moment. So I just started a company, literally, and designed a line of cards, figured out how to send them to press, wrote the first check. The guy came and dropped the cards off at my house. I think the total cost of the press run was about $2,500. And I had $1,500 of babysitting money in my checking account. And when I wrote the check to pay for the first run of cards, if he had gone to the bank was closed, he delivered them. But if he had gone to the bank, the check would have bounced.
Calculated risk.
Yes. So I went to my boss at the paper store who knew about calculated risk and said, hey boss, I need a loan. And he gave me the money to start the business. So we hit that was 2002. That was about August of 2002. And it took 4 years for us to hit our first $1 million in sales. And it's a bootstrap story because I used my resources as I grew the business, and some of the resources that I think you have to learn to use as an entrepreneur are the people around you. And I used my network, and I realized when I moved to Dallas, I thought, oh, I can find babysitting jobs and I can go work at a stationery store and I'll build my network, but it didn't happen. It was impossible. When I moved back to Oklahoma City, I realized that that part of my team that was going to help me grow that business was already around me. And it was the people I'd been babysitting for, it was my boss, it was the fact that I was babysitting for the president of the bank's kids, and so when I needed a line of credit, I was feeding his kids chicken nuggets, and I said, by the way, do you think you can loan me 25 grand? And he said, yeah, this is who you call. And yesterday, we actually were in the middle of a huge technology project, and we got to, if they give you enough rope to hang yourself, and that rope is cash, to be totally honest, we're at the end of that rope. We are hanging ourselves on a cash flow standpoint right now that I almost in tears in my bookkeeper's office, I realized, okay, I can call the same people I called when I needed money the first time. And I made 3 phone calls, and 3 people said, yeah, and guess what? This time you have a track record. So I'll give you a lot more than we gave you before. And that gets into vision and dream and what the potential really is. And I think that's the heart of an entrepreneur is it's easy to, when you really believe in something, it's easy to cast that vision, and it's easy to keep going in the mornings, even though I think the life of an entrepreneur is not something, it's something I love, but it's just not for everybody. There's too much ambiguity. So that's kind of where we are.
Thank
All right.
you.
Yeah.
Steve?
I think one of the things that I've learned in business is that it's never a cakewalk. No matter how long you've been there, there's always like stuff that can go wrong, like you're saying. And so I think 2009 for us was, after 36 years, 37 years in business, 2009 came along and just totally knocked us off our feet. Our 2 biggest customers, Circuit City and Chrysler, both went bankrupt. Circuit City was a complete wipeout loss, and Chrysler fortunately came back into business in about 6 months later. But it was a big shock, and also we had to lay off about 40 people out of 250, and we had never laid anybody off in the history of the company. So yeah, it's kind of like if you want to be an entrepreneur, it's really a lot of fun, but there's never a free ride. There's always things that come up, and so you've got to be thinking all the time. You can't just kick back and go, well, we kind of got it made now. It just doesn't work that way. So you definitely have to like to be engaged in what you're doing. And I think I really got started as a kid. I used to love go-karts, and I was always like wanting to get a bigger engine and trade things out. And so I remember I wanted to buy this engine from this mechanic who I thought was a really old guy. He's like 50 years old. And so I told my dad, I said, "What would you call him up and make him this offer?" And I had something I wanted to trade him for it and give him some money. And he said, "No, I won't do that. You're going to have to do that." And so we talked about it, and he helped me kind of figure out what my offer would be. And I was probably 13 years old, and this guy was like ancient, I thought, and it was scary. But I didn't even think anything about it until years later. But he got me involved in buying and selling, and he made me do the buying and selling. So the other thing that we did was we built things. He was in architecture, but he liked to build things as a hobby, cabinets, woodworking. We built the first speaker that I ever built we built together when I was in high school for my rock and roll band. And but that, I guess, kind of came together after I had dropped out of grad school and kind of just like totally burned out on everything, not knowing what I was going to do. And I thought, I want to start a speaker company. I really love speakers. I've been building speakers since I was a sophomore in high school when my dad helped me build the first one. It was a hobby. And so I didn't really think about the potential for failure, I guess. I had about $12,000 I'd inherited from both of my grandparents, and I told my roommate I wanted to start a speaker company, and asked him if he wanted to do it with me, and he goes, yeah, I guess so. And he had just dropped out of grad school too, so, you know, this is really a testimony to, you know, getting out of school like not really. It was just, that's where we were. We didn't know what we wanted to do, frankly. We were just, you know, had not a clue. And so we started that business, but I think one of the keys to really being an entrepreneur is that you got to do something that you love, because it's not going to be easy. And you've got to hang in there. But I never really thought about, for me, failure was just never an option. Never crossed my mind that it wouldn't work, and we just started going for it. And I think that was from back when my dad taught me how to sell things and how to build things, and so I thought, well, let's do it. That's what I know how to do. And we lost money. After 4 years, I lost all my money, and then made a little bit in the 5th year. And I'm kind of a slow starter, really. And it took 7 years, actually, to make enough money to support my family, which was kind of nice, because my wife had her first child and quit teaching school. She supported us basically for 7 years. And I played in the rock and roll band and did my thing, and, you know, was pretty immature, and kind of starting a business and not knowing what I was doing. And somehow I survived. We survived. And it was actually a lot of fun. But in 1980, a guy asked me to design a speaker for a pickup truck, and I had a little business going, and we were selling PA systems to bands. I was playing in a band, and he said, we need a pickup speaker that goes behind the seat in a pickup truck. A lot of these guys are working in the oil field. They have money, they drive pickup trucks, and they want sounds in their truck. Can you design a speaker to go behind the seat? Because in those days there weren't like king cabs and crew cabs and things so much. It was just regular pickups. And so I did that. It was pretty easy, because that's all I've been doing for about 7 years, was building speakers and barely making any money. And it was a big success. They call it the ass kicker, because that's what it did. And it worked pretty well. It was a
lot of deaf guys.
Yeah, right. We're going into the hearing aid business next. It's all going to come full circle here. But that was this friend of mine had been a customer at my store when he was going to OSU, and he convinced me to try to market these speakers to other car stereo shops. I had no interest in doing that. I thought I was going to be building like big PA systems and all this stuff, and I mean that was my vision, and I still like that stuff. But so let's try it, you know, kind of a side venture. And so it so happened that we were right in the beginning of kind of the car stereo boom in 1980, when people started wanting better sound in their cars. They developed power amplifiers. They could put more power into the speakers to make them play louder. They didn't really have those before. And, you know, really, thank God, it wasn't my plan. I was just in the right place at the right time with the right product. And I knew how to build it, because all I've been doing for 7 years was building speakers. And we just began to sell these, and it was just too easy. And this doesn't always happen, believe me, because these days it's too hard. But back then, it was just too easy. And we put these speakers in a pickup truck, and my buddy went around to car stereo shops in different towns, look in the yellow pages, find the best looking one, drive around and get the owner out there, and to hear this product in the car. We demonstrated it, and it sold itself, and we just sold almost 100% everywhere we went. It was just as fast as we could do it. So we covered all these states around Oklahoma, Texas, Louisiana, Colorado. Then we started attending electronic shows in Las Vegas and Chicago and hiring reps and expanding out. And by the end of the 80s, I sold this other little business. My PA business was, you know, that big, and this one was this big. We grew about 70%, on an average 70% a year for 10 years in a row. And we just went like this, and so it was quite a learning curve. You know, almost a disaster most of the time, but we held it together and ended up getting into international business in 1990, and just kind of a dream come true, really. But it was not in the area that I thought it was going to be. It was an opportunity, and I guess, you know, I do look for opportunities. One of the things regarding just the teams and the individual is that my idea at first was that I would hire people. It was like I would be the brains and they would be the brawn, you know. I would just tell them what to do and they would fulfill my ideas and dreams. Really, I mean, that's what I thought. And I learned pretty quickly that they had minds too, and that not everybody wanted to work that way. And then I began to realize, hey, you know, we've got some employees that are like smarter than I am in this stuff. And, you know, it's, I mean, it sounds stupid, but when you start something, you kind of think that you know a lot about it if it's something you've been doing for a while, you're really into it. And, but I began to realize that I couldn't do it all, and that if you hire people that are smarter than you, that know how to do other things, and they can kind of share your vision and what you want to do, you could really grow. And we just had to do that in the 80s because we grew so fast. Had to do that and do it really pretty quickly. And so I guess we came out of the 80s, and I realized that, you know, I'm just one of the people. You know, I've got ideas and things, but we've got to rely on everybody to bear the weight, you know, of the business because it's getting pretty big. And so I'm still trying to balance the individual and the team, I guess, because it's a constant sort of a struggle if you're an idea person and kind of have ideas about how you want to do things. You've got to let go and let other people do their stuff. And I'm not sure you ever totally just solve that. It's just something you deal with all the time. And if you understand it, you can deal with it and be successful. And I think help other people be successful. I think that's one of the keys. So.
Thanks, Chief. Jack?
Good job. Well, first of all, I want to apologize to the host. I didn't get back with you, and fortunately, I got your bio information, but I hope you didn't think I should have. I apologize. And I also want to say...
He's legit.
I don't know about that. Talk about legit. My son, Grant, graduated last year from Oklahoma State, and graduated in the entrepreneurial program. And one of his duties along the way was an internship with Steve's company. And he's now working at CFR. I told Mike I fired him a couple months ago, but we hired him under some new rules, and he's doing great now. But in the process, he's attended a few meetings, and we were having one yesterday about our website. And part of this why we do what we do stuff started coming out. And it's not what we do, it's why we do it. And we started talking about our culture. And as a result of Grant's experience at Kicker, he brought up, he said, one thing that they do really well is they give people the sense that they are part of something bigger than themselves. They whatever they do, they get that commonality of interest. And that's what the trust piece is about, is the commonality of interest. And we got thousands of different definitions of trust, but from a business perspective, the trust piece is that commonality of interest. And that common interest drives those decisions. If you don't have common interest, then those decisions are typically not going to be made very healthy. If you don't have a common interest, then a lot of times you don't have that mutual respect either. And so you don't listen to the other people. As a matter of fact, if you look at the way decisions are made, you can tell a lot about a company. If decisions are made while people are looking at each other and there is this common interest to do something, then when that decision is made, they can turn their backs and go do it. If there's not a common interest and there's not mutual respect, not mutual trust and respect, then the decisions are made not looking at each other, and they spend the rest of their time looking over their shoulders to see if somebody's going to stab them in the back. So whatever Steve has done, he's done it in such a way that he's gotten people in his organization to believe in what they, on why they do it, I think, more than what you do. We do it because...
He must have worked there at a pretty good time.
He did. It was great. And then, the day after, they have to fire 40 guys. So Megan Grant was the problem.
He was there upside.
And
it's really true.
But it is real important, and that stage of your evolution to really find a way for people to get that common interest. And I read a little bit about Whitney online, and oh, by the way, do you know what this fish's name is?
Yeah.
Okay. What is this fish's name?
George.
Right there, George. That's pretty cool.
You did your research.
So, by the way, since I figured it'd be late when you get home, here's a little and every fish needs a castle. It's food, we don't want it to starve. And maybe some rocks for the bottom. So I'll let you have that stuff later. I'll put George back in here. Okay, so what you're saying is something I knew instinctively. Steve, do you remember why you remember me?
Well,
So I had the fortunate opportunity to be in another program, I guess a couple of programs now with Steve, and just the passion he has for music. By the way, so does Uncle Mike. Mike's got a drum set in his garage, so. And I've been to a couple of concerts with Mike.
What is the risk that's that?
I make being me look a lot easier than it really is. But I remember one thing I like to do is I like to create moments for people. It's just, and I don't know why. I don't know. I can't explain to you how I learned that, and I'm not sure I can teach it to you. And I think that's what happens is when you get in touch with that natural talent that you have, you can't explain it sometimes. It just happens. So when I heard Steve and listened to his passion for music, particularly music in that Tom Petty era, I remembered that I'd just seen a Tom Petty DVD that was just off the charts cool. And so I sent him a Tom Petty DVD concert. Now, he didn't watch it for quite a while. He may still have never watched it.
I've watched it.
Is it not awesome? It's awesome.
It's awesome.
But what's funny is one of the kids in the class said, why didn't you give Steve your business card? And I said, well, it seems to me that Steve's the kind of guy that probably gets about 1,000 business cards a day because everybody wants to hang out with Steve. And I'm guessing that if he has those business cards, he probably never looks at them again. But I will tell you something. Whether I do business with Steve or not, he will remember who I am because I'm going to send him something that nobody else does. I listened to him and I said, what do you like? What's important to you? Now, I don't really give a damn about a lot of stuff of his because I got my own problems, okay? But I think. I say I make it look easier than it really is. But what I do know is that's my gift, and if you get what you get, then it's easier to get what other people get. And you said it, Steve. Why he's here is because he wants the people around him to be successful. He wants the people who buy his equipment to have a good experience. He wants the people who work for him and with him, not only as employees, but as vendors, to be successful. And he understands that not everybody has the same definition of success. And I'm guessing, Whitney, you got a lot of that too. Now, why am I here? Well, I'm here because I just don't quit. That's about it. I mean, I graduated from Oklahoma State, Vietnam was going on, I had a wife that I hated, and she hated me, so it was okay. I mean, you don't feel as bad about hating somebody as you do.
Makes it positive.
Yeah, two negative, make it positive. If we were positive, we hated shit. So it was kind of tough to get a job in 1969 because everybody was worried about whether you wanted to be a Dom. Fortunately, I got my draft notice the same day that I enlisted in the National Guard. And the reason I enlisted in the National Guard is because I was awake when I met this fraternity brother of mine out of Oklahoma City that happened to be the colonel in the National Guard making the decisions who got into the National Guard in Oklahoma City, and I reminded him of our brotherhood when I reintroduced myself. So, you know, and I think, as I tell a story, I think the common thread is the stars are always in some kind of alignment. The dots are always out there someplace. And the real key is to be awake when you need to connect the dots, when you need to connect the stars. Just like you said, you know, hey, I'm babysitting for the banker. Duh! You know, there's a dot here. Connect that dot with your need and get that connection. So you were awake when you needed to be awake. And you can't be awake all the time. I mean, there's only so much 5-hour energy you guys can drink. By the way, that's so much better than the no-dos we used to take during school. I mean, you remember when we dropped those no-dos? Oh, I got a cramp in this. But, okay, so
water.
You probably noticed a little ADD with me, but that's just what happens. So back to graduated from school, got a job at the Hartford Insurance Company. I don't know why. I know why I took the job, because it was the only one offered. And it was kind of cool because they had this idea that they needed a management training program. So I was one of 18 kids from throughout the United States that they selected. Now there's no reason to select me. I mean, I got 2.4 grade average, okay? I'm not like a rocket science. And, but I'm really good on my feet, and I guess the interviewer liked me. And I did wind up graduating at the top student in that class because I found something that I was interested in. I wanted to be the best at that particular thing. So our drive is influenced by a lot of different things. And in my case, I made up my mind that I want to be good. And stayed with the Hartford for 4 years, lived in Oklahoma City, Hartford, Connecticut, Albany, New York, Denver, Colorado, and Madison, Wisconsin. I mean, that's how big companies used to do it. I mean, you had to be mobile. And of course, I had this wife that I hated that I drove around, and a kid that had colic, and you know, all of this stuff that you're just not supposed to have when you dream. But in Madison, Wisconsin, after 4 years, I was the top marketing representative in the country for Hartford Insurance Company. I lived in Madison, Wisconsin, and my territory was between Madison and Milwaukee, and I grew that profitably more than any other marketing rep in the country in that particular year. So, I mean, I'm just about the coolest guy in the world at that point, right? I got my $100 bonus. That was really cool. And then I thought, well, as a marketing rep for the Hartford Insurance Company, what you do is you call on independent brokers in your area and you help them make the decision to promote your products, the products of the Hartford Insurance Company. And so I help a lot of guys sell a lot of insurance. I mean, we even got very involved in a couple of really nice association programs. I mean, I don't know how many of you guys ever heard of the National Silo Manufacturers Association, but up in Wisconsin they know who they are. And it's the guys that build concrete silos, and nobody wanted to insure them. So I talked to Hartford into putting a program together for something nobody wanted, and they made a ton of money. And we did the same thing with a welding supply program, which is like, how much welding supply distributors, those things blow out. Well, those have hair on them, and they create a lot of opportunity if you do it correctly. So as a result of that, I learned how to create programs. I learned how to help the sales guys put something together that they could sell to their customers. So I thought, it's really cold up in Madison. I don't know how many of you guys have been there, but it's, you know, when you go out to your car and it's 27 below and the wind chills are like 70 below and your nose hairs are freezing off and you're afraid to open your mouth because your teeth will fall out. It's cold. So I wanted to get out of there, and you know, I knew Tulsa, Oklahoma, and there was an agency in Tulsa that I contacted, and they said, sure, come on back, you must be pretty cool. So I did, got the job, and 18 months later they fired me. And then I got 2 kids by then, and really hate my wife, but I love the kids. So I knew I had to get a job, and so I got a job with another insurance agency, and it only took me 12 months to get fired from them. Now, what happened to this kid that was, you know, the king of the Hartford, and had all this product knowledge? What I hadn't discovered was the importance of having someone as your mentor, your champion, someone within those organizations who cared about you. And what did happen at the Hartford is that the sales manager at the Hartford cared about me. He gave me hints. He kind of kept me on task. When I went to work for these insurance agencies, they said, well, God, we know you know more about insurance than anybody your age. You're really good at that. We got some really crappy accounts that we can't figure out, so why don't we give those to you and go out and sell, and good luck. But there was no one in that organization that really supported my efforts, that teamed with me. So it wasn't that I didn't have the entrepreneurs, I just didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to connect those dots. So after I got fired from the first one because I just, even though I was calling on clients and doing some good things, those clients had no reason to buy from me. They were just, they'd call their existing agent and say, hey, this guy done a bunch of stuff, does it make sense? And the other agent that wrote it would go, yeah, it makes a lot of sense, let's fix it, I'll fix it for you. Don't give it to him. And then the second guy I went to work for really taught me a lot about relationships, but he also taught me, or at least what I saw was a significant lack of integrity. He would tell anybody anything in order to get the business, and I thought, God, that's just not how I want to live my life. So I quit there really probably the day before he was going to fire me anyway, because I wouldn't have done that well to start with. And I sure wasn't going to do the stuff he asked me to do. What happened to me is, I don't know, I'm probably more of an innovator than an entrepreneur. I like to take a look at the way people are doing things and see if there's a different twist you can put on. And you kind of did that too. I mean, even though you had started out with building stuff, a lot of it is something that you took off of something someone else had done, and then that's what we do in the same way with Whitney. So it's not that all entrepreneurs just, I got a dream and let's go, you know, split the apple. But I was ready to just call it quits. And this guy that owned a a company called Chrysler and Circuit, which is 10 or 12 people, called me and he said, I understand you're getting ready to quit, and before you quit the industry, he said, before you do that, would you come talk to me? And I go, sure, I'll talk to anybody. I need a job. And what he told me changed my world. He said, you're the best insurance agent I've ever come up against. You have beat me on my 2 most significant accounts, but I got to keep the business. So I know you can do it. What I'm offering you is I will give you the biggest account in our office to handle. So instead of giving me the smallest stuff, the stuff that nobody wanted, and instead of just leaving me on my own, he said, I want you to take over our most significant account and let's visit once a week and see what's going on. Well, it changed my world. And over the next 4 years, I doubled my income every single year. Doubled or more. I mean, to being by far the most significant producer in this organization. But what was happening was, his son was also in that organization, and I didn't like what I saw that was going to happen. His son didn't have the same beliefs that I did, and I think that's important as an entrepreneur. And I even talk about it. What do you stand for? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? It's not all about it. Very rarely is it ever about money. At some stage of the game, as the organization grows, you do have to focus on the profitability of the organization because the organization's not going to be around. It's not profitable. But that's not what drives you. What drives you is this why stuff. Why do I get out of bed in the morning? And in my case, I just really enjoy helping people make better decisions. And a lot like Steve, helping people be successful. But this young man that was the heir apparent to the agency didn't have that same belief system. And so I went, the reason I own CFR now is because I went in and quit. I didn't have another job, but I knew that I couldn't do that. I knew where it was going. And the gentleman that owned the agency was getting closer to leaving and leaving it to his son. And what happened just surprised me. And it was one of those days where I was awake. And he said, why don't you buy me out instead? Yeah, well, that was what I was thinking. Not. But, you know, there's an opportunity. And I said, okay. And then, kind of like Whitney, I went into pretty significant debt. Now, the good news is he partnered up with me, and so I only got half of it to start with. But I had to go to the Kemper Insurance Company to borrow a pretty good size 6-figure number to buy half of an agency that I did almost half of the revenue for. But in all fairness, I mean, he owned the agency, so it was his business. And within 2 years, the Kemper Insurance Company canceled our contract, and I had to pay all that money back, so that was a lot of fun. With me, good luck. But it happens. It happens along the way. And fortunately, we've stayed on point. And yeah, now we're 100+ people and a couple $100 million in premium and some great clients. And we get out of bed and have created a company where we get voted best company to work for in Oklahoma. And interestingly, from an Oklahoma City chamber, not the Tulsa chamber. So anyway, I've taken enough time, but thank you guys for the show.
Do you want to explain fish?
No, I want Whitney to explain that.
I think it's now, it's in our bio, it's in our company bio on our English paper company blog, I think, but it says, you know, we're an office of, you know, I think it says something like we're 13 people. We have, you know, among the 13 people, there are, you know, 70 dogs, 70 cats, 70 babies, because we're a bunch of women, and most of my employees are under the age of 30. And at the very end of it, it says, we don't have a fish, but we'd like one. If you bring him, if you bring us a fish, we'll love him and call him George. And
There you go.
By the way, George is orange and black and has a mustache.
So, to the topic of the night.
Oh, but it was a team effort. I didn't go get the fish. Talk about teams. I mean, when I asked my assistant to do that, she knew exactly, I mean, because we know each other, because we communicate. She goes, I got it, you don't need to tell me anything else. I said, go to the website, look at what Whitney's blog says, and I knew it was going to be done. I knew that was all I had to do.
So, what does the concept of a team mean to you? How is that different than a set of people that happen to work at the same place?
You have to have something that holds you together, I think. I mean, there's got to be some commonality of vision. You don't get everybody that maybe has the same vision, like for me, like to build a great speaker or product, that they've got to sort of buy into what you're trying to do and want to be a part of it. It may not be their particular thing, but they see that they can add value and that they can share in the success of it. And hopefully it's more than a job, I think.
There's got to be a common goal. And one of the most amazing conversations I ever had with one of my employees was a super talented, super smart girl, graduated with piles and piles and piles of honors and 4.0 everything, and could do anything she put her mind to. And she sat in my office, and I said something along the lines of, "But you have so much to add to the company." And to me, it was a simple statement. To her, it was a light bulb moment and a turning point in her employment with us. And now she comes to work, and all I had to say was, she needed to hear it. She needed to hear me say, "You bring an immense amount of value to the company." And I cited some of her strengths that I saw that saying it changed things and made her feel like she was a part of what we were working towards.
One of the interesting things, especially in the early days of Adventure, you alluded to the notion of giving people a sense that they're part of something bigger than themselves. How do you do that?
I think it starts with, in our case anyway, is realizing that the people that work in our organization are going to spend more of their waking hours with us than they are with their families. And why shouldn't that be a pleasant experience? And if you care about the people in your organization, they're significantly more likely to care about you. So treat them like they want to be treated. I think that the first break all the rules book, which some of you may have read, it says, look, the golden rule is treat others like you'd like to be treated. Maybe it's treat others like they'd like to be treated, because we're all different. So if you can identify how people can use their natural talents and match those up with the skill sets necessary and the job that needs to be done, I think you set people up for success. And so to me, that's the role of management, is to set people in your organization up for success, where you can match up their talent, their skill sets, and the job that needs to be performed. And it's not really that magical. It just seems like magic when it works.
think being, it does kind of start at the top that that you've got to be thinking that you want to be greater than where you are now, and maybe that you have to have a vision that kind of reaches out, and then other people catch that vision that's hey, that's what we're trying to do. I can't say I started with that at all, but I always had just a thought that this thing would be bigger. And I remember we went to visit a company in Oklahoma City in the 70s. My original partner and I did. It's called Alltech Lansing, and big plant. And we were just starting. This is probably '74, and we were just starting the business building PA cabinets for bands, and they built big PA systems. I mean, they were a worldwide company, and they had this big factory in West Oklahoma City. And we went there and asked for a tour, and the guy was very nice, and he said, "You can have a tour." And I feel really stupid about saying this, but later I said, "Well, don't worry, because we're not competing with you. We're doing like something different, because we were just building speaker boxes. We didn't make the amps and all this stuff." And when we left, I don't remember, my partner said, "Why did you say that? That was so stupid." I mean, here's the two guys, driving this beat up van. They're showing us around this huge plant. And I don't know, I just felt like I needed to say that. And but I thought about it years later. Eventually, they went out of business, and now our company's bigger than theirs is. And you don't know where you're going to end up, And I guess I've always just thought, let's just sort of get on this horse and ride, and sort of go as fast as we can, and see where it ends up. Because I don't know where it's going to end up, but I'm going to keep riding. I'm going to keep going. I want to see what's around the next corner. I just want to see what's going to happen, if we do this. And so, to me, that maybe that rubs off, that we're trying to be something greater, than what we are. And maybe we don't exactly know what it is, but we're going for it. We're going to find out. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
I think it's hard to. I think it's hard to, for me at least, over 9 years of being in business. I counted the other day, and we've actually employed over 60 people, and we currently only have 13 people on staff. And I asked myself, why aren't the other 40 plus people around? And when we can get people on board with the sense, when we can get them on board with that sense of they're involved in something bigger than themselves, they tend to stay. But I've had trouble identifying what that is. And recently read Delivering Happiness by Tony Hsieh. It's an easy read, and
it is so fun to read.
Yeah, it's an amazing. Tony Hsieh's the guy who sold Zappos to Amazon for. Stock was valued at $1 billion on the day of sale. So basically, he sold for $1 billion. And
billion.
And this is a dude who graduated from Harvard. Yeah, and said he wasn't going to have anybody edit the book, and he completely butchers grammar in the book. But so definitely go read it. But he talks about how he created a culture. He talks about how he started a company called Link Exchange that he sold to Microsoft, and he sold it to Microsoft because he didn't like the culture. He'd been hiring friends and friends of friends, and he didn't like what was created. And so it's been, since reading that book, it's really been a challenge to me to identify what our culture is, what about that culture I want to change, what makes people stay, and then hire the kind of people that stay. And in the past year, we've completely revamped our interview questions from questions relating to skill set, and we start off with 15 questions that relate to personality type. And if I don't get the answers on the personality type questions that tell me that they're going to be a fit, I don't even go to skill set. I have some of the shortest interviews in the world, but it's been working, and we've been hiring people that are sticking around, and they see whatever it is that makes them feel like they're part of that something bigger. That seems to be helping that process.
I'm curious, that word fit, how do you define it? Do you think it's in terms of adding to the team, being a fit?
I think on some levels, it feels superficial to actually say the things that make somebody fit. I mean, we're a team of females. The guy really doesn't fit in. And I mean, that sounds ridiculous to say, but
No guys allowed.
yeah, it's
No, we couldn't say no girls allowed.
right. I know.
That didn't say right.
Tricky. Well, I mean, we'll interview guys and hire guys, and we, you know, my husband works with us sometimes, and currently we have a consultant on, and he's a guy, and they come in and out, they just don't stay.
Some of them work.
Yeah, we already hired one, he better be cute.
So I mean, so yeah, identifying what creates a fit, I think has been a challenge for us, and beyond that, it took identifying our company's core values, which a lot of times I'll speak about strategic planning and what we've done as a small entrepreneurial company, and I always talk about visions, missions, values, goals, and the values part is really important, and what we're a culture of. And so as we sort of identify, we're a do more with less culture. And so one of our interview questions relates to how resourceful people are, and if people can kind of get creative with interview answers and say something really off the wall, or not be afraid to answer what sounds like a wacky question, they're digging in their brain as a resource for an answer.
So Jack would interview well. Other than
Probably.
I'm not cute though. So. That's where is that?
I don't know. I mean, what do you guys look for fits?
One of the things we try to look for is values. You know, if people don't share some of the same basic values, you're probably going to have a problem. You don't always know that, but you can ask some questions to get at that. The other thing is just generally, I guess, what they call culture. Like, what's it like to work here? You know, with these people. You know, what does it feel like? And is this the type of environment you like? So, if they're generally higher up people, you know, that are going to be in management positions, something like that, we have them interview. We sort of run them through the ringer, but we have them interview with almost everybody that they will interact with on a daily basis, and then we kind of get together after they're gone, and we say, okay, what'd you think? And you know, it's worked pretty well for us. We did the personality tests and all that, you know, and that's okay. But I'm more interested in our people that they're going to work with. What do you think of them? You know, is this going to work? And generally, there's some kind of a consensus there. And I'll have to say, I'm not the best person to do that, because, you know, I probably think they're great, and they're really not. But we've got some other people, I think, that are more discerning in those areas that make pretty good picks. And so I rely a lot on our people to help make that decision. And it generally works. It seemed to work pretty well.
Yeah. There's an expression, fast is slow and slow is fast. And what you described is a fairly detailed process to make good decisions, as opposed to filling a spot and then having to figure out why did we do that and what are we going to do about it, and setting people up for failure. I mean, one of the keys, I think, is we try to find, if you try to find a way to set people up for success from the very beginning, then that means you've got to see if they're going to fit in culturally. You have to see how their talent and skill sets match the job. So if you can find out, which by the way, there are some tests. I mean, we test skill sets with one set and with one profile, and we test the natural talent stuff with another. You guys know the difference between talent and skills? Skills is that learned behavior stuff, that cognitive stuff. The natural talent is that conative stuff that just comes naturally. It's just kind of like, yeah. I got a fish. I got a DVD for him. It's just how I process stuff. So I'm pretty good at sales, even though I sucked at it when I didn't connect the dots, when I didn't have the right environment. So the reason I got successful was because the last job I had, the guy recognized my skills. I was really good at insurance. He knew I had the talent, and he matched it up with a role that was appropriate for where I was at the time. And then he encouraged, and the organization encouraged my growth. And isn't that kind of what happens? If you make those decisions real quickly, hey, you know, if Steve or I make those decisions individually, as smart as we think we are, I don't know about you, but I'm wrong at least 61% of the time.
Amen.
And you pay a big price for hiring the wrong person.
And then you turn around and you go, well, why didn't it work? Well, guess what, dummy? It's your fault. You made a bad decision because you didn't take the time to make the right decision.
And they've got to have a skill set. It's almost like, you know, being in the automotive business these days. I mean, if you want to be an automaker, you better build a really good car. I mean, that's just the ticket to enter the game. You got to have a really good, reliable car, and then it goes on from there. And so you do need to hire people, you know, that have that can really pull the weight. Especially the bigger the company gets, you need people that can pull the weight, because there's a lot of weight to carry, and they need to be able to do that. Don't hire your friends. Unless
they're really good.
Skill set. They're really good. You know, that's the wrong reason.
And they don't report to you.
Right. And right. Yeah. So, you know, just be objective about it. But people need to show your values and be able to fit in, be part of the group to a reasonable extent. You know. And sometimes that's. I go on, you know, the group thing. What does everybody think? And we generally, I think, come up pretty good on that. But we've hired people that didn't have the skill set, and that's pretty bad too. Even if they really do fit in, but they just can't, especially in a higher position. It's a tough one.
So what is the one thing about teams that you learned that you really wish you knew in the early days?
They're really valuable. Like I said, I thought I could do it all myself, you know, and I did. I mean, that's the way you think as an entrepreneur. I swept the floors and cleaned the toilets and wrote the checks. And, I mean, I did everything. And so you get to thinking this all depends upon me, and that's a mistake. But it truly shifts on you because it starts that way, that it is all dependent on you. And then you got to shift to more this team thing. And that's hard. That's kind of the hard part, is to make that shift. And you're always making that shift, to me, almost every day, no matter how far you go. I've been in this for a lot of years, and you're still having to do that. You still got to balance it, because it just doesn't happen automatically. But you can't pull the load if you don't have the right team of horses. If you don't have enough horses, you can't pull the load. You know, you need a team to do it.
I've got a number of other questions, but let's start to get some of your questions in. Who's got one? Yeah. Ryan?
I certainly don't mean to sound morbid or anything, but if something were to happen to you guys, very, very detrimental, to put you out of commission, so to speak, how much confidence do you have in your team to carry on?
I have a lot of confidence in my team's desire to carry on. I know that there are some people who would say, you know, when he's not around, it's, you know, because I think they'd almost work harder in some capacity, because I think they feel a little bit lost at times. And the question, even as you asked, it sort of challenged me to think that'd be an interesting conversation to have with our vice president. You know, what would she do if something did happen?
I'm currently having that dialogue with senior management in our organization. I am 80%, currently now I'm 80% of the organization, and 20% is owned by another individual, and we brought a president on a few years ago who is wanting some ownership, and he's younger, and one of the things he wanted to talk about the other day was mandatory retirement age. And I'm 64, and I'm going, I hope you're not thinking 64. But we can have that kind of conversation with Kit about it. The reality is it does take a structure and some conversation. I'm very comfortable that our organization would go on without me. And my senior management team is probably comfortable that they'd be even better. So that's cool. I like us. You know, the thing that at this stage is, it's hard as an entrepreneur to let go because it's your baby. But by the same token, if you look at any kind of life cycle, if you don't let go of the baby doesn't get to grow. You know, the baby becomes dysfunctional. And that creates either infant mortality or this crazy cuckoo kid. You know, there's got to be some way for your baby, the company, to survive if you're not there. And if you think about that before you're not there, that's the most appropriate way to do this. It's a good question, and it is one that all entrepreneurs have to address. At some stage, you have to go from a market-driven value to understanding that there has to be a professional management team to take it to the next level. And hopefully you've had a positive influence on that management team so that it will do that, whether you're there or not.
Yeah, I think you have to just continually be trying to work yourself out of a job. I mean, that's what I've always thought. You just got to be continually trying to pass things off, get things up to other people, let go. But the truth is, as long as you're there, you know what, I mean, unless you're just sitting around reading the newspaper, you're going to be like really involved. And so if you're not there, it's going to be a big hiccup. I think like in our organization, everything runs fine without me. But I'm like giving input here and there. I mean, I don't just sit and read the newspaper, you know. So yeah, that's going to be a change. And but I think a lot of times, if you've got people in place that are good, solid leaders that show the values and the ethics and this sort of thing, my hope is that they'll rise to the occasion. A lot of times people don't rise to the occasion unless they have to rise to the occasion to be that person. So as long as I'm there, I'm not sitting in the back chair all the time. I'm involved, and that's kind of what people want. But if I'm not there, somebody needs to rise to the occasion, which would, in our case, would be basically our general manager and then our VP team that would pick up the ball and run with it from there. But most of the stuff can be done without me. It's just like I like to fiddle with it, you know. So.
I think that in terms of working yourself out of a job, that you know, thinking that Steve Jobs just left Apple, and then also just another experience I related to recently is I was at a printers conference in Chicago, and this guy was sitting at our table for dinner, and then next thing they know, they're presenting the next speaker, and he walks up and he's blah blah blah. Here's my story, and then I bought Snapfish. I was like, oh my gosh, I was just telling you how to run how to print company, and now you're up there speaking about how you own Snapfish. It's really funny, but
You and George.
yeah, and I did, but I asked him later on. I said, you know, how do you do it? How many employees do you have? And it turns out it's a gajillion, and oh my word, how do you manage all those people? It's just sometimes it makes your blood pressure go up. Like 250 people. So anyway,
Don't do it all yourself.
well, I mean, and that's the thing. He said somebody's running a press. You just walk up to him and you stand there by him and you say, you know what, you're doing a good job running that press today. I really appreciate you doing that. And so I think if you're successfully working yourself out of a job, the last person to replace is yourself, and at that point in time, you're just chief cheerleader, for lack of a better word. I think you're that person who's that, you know, figurehead that people aspire towards, sort of in an ideal format, it seems like.
So, consistent with Ryan's questions, Steve, has your management team advocated a position that you didn't really agree with, but you went along with because they felt that was the way to go?
Yeah, I think almost every day they advocate something different, you know, but we talk about it, and usually we come to some agreement on it. We don't vote. If we can't all come to something that we kind of agree on, usually we kind of table it. But yeah, I've got to change my mind. I mean, I've learned that, and I can be pretty, you know, strong-headed about things, and I think that's one thing that you don't ever totally get there, but I try to hear what people say, and I try to be rational, you know, and if it doesn't, if it makes sense, yeah, I think something just happened the other day that I was pretty set on this one direction, and then they convinced me that we should go another way, and I think they were right. So I think I realized, well, if you realize that you're not infallible, then you can be more open to what other people have to say. If you think you know everything, then you won't be open to the fact you can make a mistake. But I've made enough mistakes to realize that I need this input from these other people, or else I can go off on a tangent myself. Pretty easy, and it makes perfect sense. It's a crazy thing, you know, but it's just not, I haven't thought about these other aspects, and that's one of the things you talked about, a team having different points of view. One thing that I do encourage in our team meetings, and sometimes they get a little bit rowdy, you know, but is that, you know, if you don't say what you think, shame on you, and don't go tell anybody else in the company about it if you couldn't say it right there in the meeting, you know. Let's get it out here, and then, you know, let's figure it out. And then when we walk out of here, let's say, that's the way we're going. But if you sort of don't say your mind, and then you walk out and go, well, they decided to do this, but I sure don't support it, you know, that undermines the morale of the company. So I'm big on, let's get the arguments out. And I like somebody that can really argue, you know, a different case. And then, because I can be persuaded once I get past my ego, you know, I can be persuaded. It's a challenge, but that's what makes a company strong, I think, is all those different people pulling in different directions, but willing to be balanced and walk out of the room with a decision. To me, you generally find a pretty good decision.
So, Whitney, the early days of the company, you got not much, and you got people doing jobs for sort of figuring it out. You doubt you had detailed job descriptions or any, fancy structure, and so you're asking more of people, and unsure whether this thing's going to go or not go. What are your views about how you reward team members? I think you didn't give equity shares to your original employees or anything like that.
No, we haven't done that yet, but it's definitely on the table for this year. There's so many, for the people that, everybody's motivated by something different. And I have 2 girls that have been with me for 7 years each. And I can speak for them and say that one of the biggest benefits they ever received is Friday night, 7 o'clock, you wanted to go home 3 hours ago, and you're sitting there taping boxes, and the UPS truck pulls up, and you tape the last box just in time, and you're throwing 54 boxes on the truck while the UPS truck is peeling out, and you did it. Like, you got that order out. And it's just this amazing go team moment that's a benefit. They love that feeling. And then it's even more fun to just hand them $100 and just say, thanks. Just it's $100, and so there's.
That was Jack's bonus for a whole year.
Here's $100 minus taxes.
Who's got a question? Rock?
I'm interested in knowing from our speakers what is your opinion about conflicts in a team. Do you consider conflicts as a bad thing or something that can be helpful, useful for the dynamic of the team? How do you manage conflicts?
Well, I think Steve just kind of responded to that with his last answer about how, if we don't openly discuss those things, then that, I guess, Adizes does a pretty good job of it, the difference between destructive conflict and constructive conflict. Okay, if you don't want conflict, about the only place you can go is maybe to the cemetery. I mean, there's conflict everywhere, right? I mean, we don't grow without conflict. I mean, our bones, our bodies, there's constant conflict within us. I mean, grass doesn't grow unless it, comes through the ground. I mean, so there's conflict everywhere. Is that conflict constructive or destructive? And distinguishing, knowing the difference between constructive and destructive conflict is the real key. And at different times in an organization's life cycle, something is destructive or constructive depending upon where you are. The story that I got related to me was this guy calls the doctor and he says, I'm really worried about my son. He wets his pants all the time and he's crying all the time. What should I do? And the doctor's response is, it depends. How old is your son? It's normal for a baby to cry and wet his pants. It's not normal for a 20-year-old to cry and wet their pants. So at that infant stage of the organization, there should be a lot of crying. That's normal. At a different level, as you're in prime, if you got a bunch of people, you're not going to get to prime if there's a bunch of 20-year-olds or 40-year-olds crying and wetting their pants. That's destructive. Okay? Now, that visual's not real pretty, but that's a real good way to distinguish. If at different times, certain conflict, you have to be able to identify, is this normal for an organization at this stage of our growth? If it is, then get out of the way, let it happen, and encourage it. If it's destructive, if you've got, let's take an employee situation. If you've got an employee who is always right, nobody else can do it then that's going to be destructive for the culture of the organization. And I don't care how long you wait, it's not going to fix itself. So that is abnormal, destructive behavior that should be addressed just like any other abnormal behavior. But if somebody's saying, man, I don't know why we're doing it this way, I think we can do it better, and they're saying that because they want the organization to get better, and you try to stop them, then I think that you're ignoring the opportunity to grow. So, that's my take.
Yeah, I think you got to have that conflict. I mean, but I think one of the things that we kind of try to guard against that's big with me is that don't make it personal, because if you get these personal conflicts going, they'll perpetuate themselves in the company, and from person to person. I don't like to work with those guys. Sales guy doesn't like to work with the marketing guy. They don't know what they're doing. You know, I mean, this sort of stuff. And personally against somebody, that's bad. But if you're on the same team and you're in there duking it out, you know, to try to figure it out, and you've got different opinions and stuff, to me, that's good. But when you leave the room, it's not personal. It's just we're all trying to do the best. And so I divide the two: personal conflict versus creative conflict, I guess you call it. None of it is kind of stressful, you know.
Both of them are stressful. One of them is destructive.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Yes, ma'am.
How did you handle that initial delegation when you were first starting out, and do you have any good delegating tips?
Were you good delegators in the early days?
I just found the things I didn't like to do and gave them to other people.
Yeah,
It seemed to work. Especially people that were good at those things. Some people like those things, you know. I hate filling out forms.
I think one of those things you talked about as a characteristic of entrepreneurs, and hopefully successful entrepreneurs, is that constant learning. And so I was always kind of looking at and saying, okay, what's the management methodology that talks about how you run companies and stuff? And I actually early on in the development of our growth, I signed up for a program called the Strategic Coach. And the whole basis of this program was delegate everything except your uniqueness. And the real issue that many entrepreneurs have delegating is they don't like it, and so they think, well, if I don't like it, it's really hard for me to delegate it to somebody else. But what this program helped me realize is that everybody has unique talents and skill sets, and while I might not be that crazy about doing something, there's somebody out there that actually loves doing that. That is their unique ability. And so it opens you up to understanding, or at least accepting. I don't think I'll ever understand why people like to do some of this crap I hate. But I do accept that there are people that do like to do that. And if I can identify, or we as an organization can identify that strength, then delegation becomes very natural. Because we recognize that when we're delegating the things that somebody else loves to do, they're probably going to be significantly better at it than we are, and we're doing them a favor.
Right.
I mean, don't you think?
It can be a win-win deal. Most of the time, every once in a while, something just has to be done. They got to do it.
You got to kill somebody.
But yeah, that's the ideal. And you know, as your organization matures, you know, you begin to find more of those people that do those things and that are good at them, really good at them. To me, it's exciting to see somebody that's really good at something and get them working with you. That's You know, it's like kicking in the superchargers, you know. It's amazing. Then you got somebody that doing a job that they're not very well suited for. It's just like pulling teeth to get stuff done. So getting the right person in there, I guess putting people in the right position or delegating the right thing to them, getting that stuff lined up, that's a big task of management. It's not that easy, but boy, it really goes, you know, when you get them in those spots.
Yeah, it may actually be the single most important role of management. There's a difference between management and leadership, but from a management perspective, the single most important role is probably matching talent and skill sets and unique abilities to the role.
Yes, ma'am.
What are your recommendations for creating a more cohesive team in your businesses?
I think you have to build relationships with everybody. I think the way I do it, and it'd be interesting to hear what you guys have to say, but I meet with people one-on-one. And that's the way I communicate to them that I care about them, and then that's what gets them out there and feeling energized and motivated, and then hopefully in turn helps their coworkers. We put a policy in place a couple years ago, just basically relating to gossip. But the rule is, if you're talking to somebody who cannot solve the problem, then you're talking to the wrong person. Then it's gossip. So, but it applies to things about people, but it also applies to issues. If you're over there just griping about, you know, you don't like how the press is running today, well, are you talking to the press maintenance guy, or are you talking to, you know, the receptionist who really is not supposed to be back by the press? She's supposed to be up there answering the phone. And I think that just kind of, that little statement sort of keeps people going the same direction, and those are the two things that.
Yeah, we're pretty big on that. Talking to the right person, and talking to the person that usually the person you need to talk to is probably the one that you don't want to talk to. That's kind of the way it goes. But communication, I think, is the key to cohesiveness, and then communicating and listening, you know. And sometimes they're a stretch, you know, it's hard to do sometimes. Make yourself do it. I have the same problem, you know, sometimes listening and just trying to give answers instead of just sitting there and listening. But communicating, people appreciate that. It shows that you value them, you value what they have to say, and that makes people want to work with you. Another thing I've heard recently is we kind of got running around our places is gripe up, not down. You know, if you have a complaint, talk to your boss, but don't tell somebody that can't do anything about it. It's like what you're saying, you're talking to the wrong person, and you're just creating bad vibes, basically bad culture. And but I don't like it when people complain to me, but on the other hand, I do, because I realize if they're only telling me, if they're not just spreading it around everywhere else, I'm going to try to do everything I can to work with them. So.
Yes, sir. Ram?
How much importance would you give to your team to be diversified? How much important do you think the team to be to have the diversity and inclusion in your organization? About diversity and inclusion.
Are you asking, do they deliberately try to create diversity in their employee base?
Or in the employee base, or the different teams within the company?
When you hire the people, or when you get new people to your organization, how much emphasis would you give to diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, I think the answer is it depends. I mean, what's the task? Some tasks don't require any diversity at all, other tasks require quite a bit of diversity. So if you identify what the task is and what authority, power and influence needs to be in that decision on how to do something, then that will dictate how much diversity you'll make.
Especially in Steve's company, your company is going all over the board, so you are having diverse customers base. So I think, is there any diverse workforce in your organization to get that market?
Now, are you talking about like ethnic diversity and hiring practices?
Ethnic or racial, or educational backgrounds like that?
With different backgrounds. Mostly, my thinking is, let's get the right person for the job. Where they're from, what color they are, I don't care. But if because I know if I get the wrong person for the job, sort of like hiring your friends. You know, I've hired my friends before, and if they can't do the job, it's a disaster. Even if they need the money and they're out of work. I mean, I've done that. So I'm kind of back to let's just get the right person for the job, and everything else is, to me, is not important. I don't know if that's politically correct or not, but so yeah, we don't have employees overseas. You know, we do business with people in a lot of different countries. I love working with people from different countries, and we don't have so many right here in Stillwater, but of course all of our international distributors are different from different countries, so we do a lot of that. All of our manufacturing is in China. We deal with Chinese all the time. I don't know. To me, it just doesn't play into it too much.
In the back.
How have your hiring processes changed over the life cycle of your company?
Well, you start out by hiring your friends, and then you learn not to, and so you don't.
Right. That's a biggie.
My early decisions hiring decisions were made out of fear. Fear that I was going to have to do it if I couldn't find somebody else. And I think as you make it out of that infancy and early childhood, you realize that the structure has to change, and you can't just. There has to be a process in place that identifies the need and what fills that need. So we don't make decisions out of fear that particular position is not going to be filled if we don't do something today.
Right.
So that's probably the most significant change. As you evolve, I think if you don't change that, then you're probably not going to evolve very far.
Hopefully you get better at it, you get more systematic, you got a lot more stuff in place.
Job description.
Job descriptions, pay scales, you got all the benefits. I mean, you've got, we have kind of a HR department that fills them in on all that. So we just never did that in early days at all. So yeah, and hopefully you get better at hiring people. And I think we have gotten better at making those decisions, because it's terribly painful to hire the wrong person, on them and you.
Yes, sir.
Within the initial startup of your entrepreneur idea, how did you inspire your team without the necessary funds or finances, and did not having those funds or finances build conflict within your team?
I think it's easier to inspire at that point sometimes than it is when you're in sort of a monotony. It's to me, that's the fun part about being an entrepreneur, is the startup mode. And I think I don't know about other entrepreneurs, but in myself, I have to recognize that I love that hair on fire, that Adiz's go-go phase, but most employees don't. So, or they love it at first, but then they get burnt out pretty quickly. Whereas I can sustain that for a long time. So, money's not a motivator. I learned that at OSU in Management 101. Dr. Mott, is he still here? Is that, anyway. Okay.
You're running out of money.
So anyway, money's not a motivator.
Went somewhere else.
Yeah, and so that's where I think getting to know each employee and figuring out what motivates them and what inspires them. We have one employee on staff right now who says money motivates her, but I know that cannot possibly be. Just, you can still have all the money in the world and be miserable. So it's just take a psychology class, I guess, to figure all that out.
Yes, sir.
Throughout the process, from going from individual, building your team, being a part of your team, what would you say the most valuable thing, personally or professionally, that you've gained from your experiences?
I think probably the most important thing is that you learn to value people, and you value good people, and because it's like if nobody comes to work, nothing's going to get done. Doesn't matter what you've got, what kind of equipment you've got, anything. It's people. That business is all about people, and it's just the bottom line. And I think I started off thinking that it was all about the product, because I was kind of a product guy, still am. But my thinking shifted over time, realizing that it really wasn't though the product that really made the company go, it was the people that made the difference. And so I think greater appreciation for that. Didn't happen overnight, but gradually I realized that's where it's at.
So, at least from my perspective, I think learning how to delegate the right stuff to the right people. I mean, early on I fired myself as president because I suck at the administrative role in the organization. I made some really bad decisions on who to take over that role a couple of times. That fast is slow, slow is fast stuff. I just, okay, fill that hole and let's get out of here. And then you had to go back and, that person have to move on because they sucked at it more than you did. But once you learn how to get that as experience, and a lot of other things happen, learning how to line up what needs to be delegated and who to delegate it to really has a significant impact.
Yes, sir.
I understand hiring friends, you all express that, but the theory behind starting a business with your friend, like Steve, you mentioned that you both dropped out of grad school and started a business. Historically, we hear about big companies like Facebook and other things where they have lawsuits between each other. Did you ever come to fisticuffs
with my original partner, I got lucky, and we got along, but he wanted out after about 3 years because we were losing money. I was the only one that had any money to lose, and he didn't have any to lose. And so he decided he wanted out. So in effect, I bought him out for what that amounted to, but he continued to work with me for 8 years. I mean, we remained good friends, and he was employed, but actually I paid him more than I paid myself for years. So I think that's one way that you work with to compensate members of your team. My thought has always been, pay them as much as you can if they're really good, and don't try to hold back. But also, you've got to be decent at accounting, or else you'll mess up. You got to be able to figure a budget, or I've paid people too much, and it wasn't profitable because I was paying somebody too much. So you can, but yeah, I'm not a big fan of partnerships. because ultimately you've got to have one person, I think, that makes the final decision, unless you're like really, really compatible. And sometimes that happens, but I think it's better for one. I would rather be the owner and pay other people more than I get paid than to kind of share it and then not see eye to eye on final decisions and stuff and get into this conflict.
Way in the back. Now it's you.
Yeah. As a company startup, often you're incredibly agile and your ability to change and go in different directions. As a company grows, often large organizations get a little bit more sluggish and not as apt to change. Do you feel it's necessary as an organization grows to stay agile and be able to change? And if so, what steps do you take to ensure that that process isn't lost as an organization grows?
Well, I think Mike had one of that bell curve where, you know, there at some point, at that prime point is the ideal place to be. So if you go too far to the right of that curve, the organization starts dying and becomes bureaucratic. And if you go too far on the left side of the curve, then maybe too much adolescence kicks in, and there's just this conflict that never stops. So the real challenge is, how do you continually infuse that entrepreneurial spirit as you have to change the organizational structure and put in place a good administrative role so that you can become a prime organization. And that's a real difficult period, and a lot of companies never make it through there. It's you know, at your age, well, how old are you? You know, we don't want to be real old, but we don't want to be real young either. And as you hit that place in organizational life cycle, to go toward prime, you have to back off of that sales-driven for a while and let the administrative role be put in place in the appropriate fashion. And then you've got to say, wait a minute, we can't let the administrative role take over the organization and become bureaucratic. So we have to keep, if you put the right administrative role in place, then you can let that entrepreneurial sales piece, you support it. And it's almost like the control, the appropriate controls help you be entrepreneurial. The inappropriate controls, bureaucratic kind of controls, keep you from being. So it's a balancing act, I mean, like you alluded to. But the awareness of that, I think, is real important. The awareness of the value of each of those roles in an organization.
So, Whitney, you spoke sort of wistfully about the startup days. How do you keep it?
I call it a fruit basket turnover. And there are just days that teams don't like it. People that want a job, and they wanted that job description, and they want to come in and they want to do the same thing every single day repetitively, don't really survive in our organization, because you just never know when I'm going to walk in and say, time for change. You know, it's too stagnant, or, you know, we're not producing the results that we want. You know, if a lot of, we do personality testing too. One of the things we do is Myers-Briggs, and there's a personality type that just stays. They just want to know what to do. They want to chart the course. They want to achieve that goal. And even if halfway there you realize that the strategy is totally wrong, they will keep running that direction straight off the edge of a cliff. And I'm the one who's going to come in and say, I have an organization full of those people, 13 of them. They all want to go that one straight line. And I'm over here going, oh, let's do this, let's do this. So there's a balance between me, you know, keeping me from getting everything too crazy, which I love, and then saying, okay, but these are the objectives. So we've come up with a method that where we sort of, it's just a really rough Excel spreadsheet, but we take opportunity cost, opportunity value, and we assign an ROI to that. And so I'm full of ideas. They're constantly coming. I'm never going to run out of them. It gives me the energy I need, and it keeps the whole startup phase kind of alive, but then it helps the team say, okay, we are going to do it or we're not. And they work with me on that. So.
Who's next? Yes.
Well, I think all of you are college graduates and some of you have been going to grad school. How would you say your college education has helped you into becoming the entrepreneur you are today? Like, how much has it helped?
It's a great way to spend 5.5 years. And I learned to appreciate beer. And in my case, probably the exposure to lots of people from lots of different viewpoints and learning some social skills that help me be aware of how I affect people, and that not everyone's as comfortable with my personality as I am. And I think very few of my instructors or classes really had that big an impact, quite frankly. But I did learn to love to learn in the process, and I learned to get along with people outside of my neighborhood. I don't know if that's the answer you wanted, but that's my answer.
I'm kind of the same way. I mean, my graduate degree was in sociology, and I think I had 4 majors before I ended up on that, and then I dropped out of sociology grad school. So I really didn't, I'm not sure that those classes per se really helped me that much, but the process of learning, and wanting to learn more about things, how to put together a project, how to research, all those activities that you do in school, whether that specific knowledge that you gain is going to be used on down the line, the processes that you learn and the disciplines and the things that you have to do are really, really valuable. So I've got a degree in sociology. I went into business. I never had any courses in business or really engineering or speaker design. So everything that I did after school, I learned on my own. I mean, but I studied, and that's a lot of how I learned it. And I went to the library and I researched it and everything on speakers, and I just kind of devoured all that stuff. But I learned how to do that in college. It just, I really wasn't on target as far as my subject, but I knew how to. So I think I got a lot of value out of it. And I got a lot of value out of the things I learned more practically in junior high and high school, the math and geometry and different writing skills and things like that. A lot of that stuff, I use them all the time.
Also your network. So I majored in interior design. What does that have to do with commercial printing? Nothing. Or technology. But I do use my professors as a network still, and friends and stuff.
Well, in all fairness, thankfully, it's changed significantly since I was in school. I mean, I didn't have the opportunity to sit in a class like you guys.
There was no class like this.
There wasn't anything like
thought about.
I mean, I didn't have Mike and Nola or a lot of other professors that I know at this university now that give you real learning opportunities outside of the book. I mean, not one time did I have this class. It wasn't available. I was the guy that sat in a management class and argued with the instructor about his interpretation of what a manager should do. The book that we were reading was about conflict, and the role of management in the textbook in 1968 was the role of management is to avoid conflict. Help the organization avoid conflict. Now, we just talked, I mean, we spent half of this class talking about the role of management is to encourage conflict. That's significantly different than what I got in 1968.
You created conflict.
I created conflict. I fought with the instructor. I said, I don't think that's right. And so I got a C. Today I get an A. Wouldn't you give me an A for fighting with you? I mean, not fighting with you. Creating constructive conflict.
Creative thinker.
Well, okay, a B. We would negotiate. We would at least be able to negotiate.
Depends on whether you buy the beer.
Of course I would. That was part of the social skill I learned.
In your delegation, how much control should you be willing to give up?
I think you have to be willing to give up all of it. You have to get to that point in your mind when you're willing to release that. But then you also have to be smart enough to know that you can't give it all away.
You could study Buddhism and realize that control is an illusion.
Yeah. Just say you do.
What do they say? Control controls you. I mean, the more you try to control something, the more that controls you. And that's philosophically fun to talk about, but in actual practice, it becomes really painful when you try to control. Really painful.
And if you go too far, you're just doing the job. You don't need that person. You know, so you're just making more work for yourself. So you want to try to pass off every bit as much as you can. But I think you got to give a little direction and have a little bit of oversight in there, because it's got to tie in with what you're doing. That's kind of the job of the top guy or a manager or anything, is to kind of make sure it all kind of pulls together, but give them as much as you can, as much line as you can.
With the right structure.
With the right structure and oversight, because otherwise you'll just be back doing it yourself.
How are you going to set them up to succeed if you're constantly back there micromanaging them?
In our corporate entrepreneurship plan, we call that giving up control to gain control. Who's next? Yes, sir.
Got it.
When you're working as a team, the members often complement each other's weaknesses and strengths. In the event that you're forced to work as an individual, what kind of weaknesses would you have, and how would you account for those?
You mean if you don't have a team to fill in?
Yeah. If you don't have a team available.
It really depends. I mean, that's a very difficult question to answer without a little bit more information. But you know, early on in all of our, I mean, Steve was talking about it, you know, I cleaned the toilets and swept the floors. Well, you do what you have to do early on. Hopefully, you know, you don't have to do, if you have to do that all the time, then something else is wrong, okay? All of us have to do certain things out of necessity. But if it's out of doing things that we suck at out of necessity all the time, then we suck at making that choice to start with, and we need to make a different choice.
Well, no man is an island, and I think you're never really doing it by yourself. Even if you're a consultant, your entrepreneurial venture is consulting, and you're just going to walk into other businesses and make suggestions or whatever. You still have, you know, parents you're going to call, or a sibling, or a buddy you're going to go meet for a beer after that, or there's a network of people around you that you're going to relate your stories, and they're going to give you advice, and so don't think that you're not part of a team just because you're not writing paychecks. You are, and I think that those resources are important to success as well.
Yeah, you don't have to own all the resources. You know, you can farm them out. You can hire somebody. I mean, I didn't like filling out tax forms, and so I got an accountant. And fortunately, he was a buddy. He gave me a good deal, so I could afford it. But I realized right then and there that you find somebody that can do something well, and you don't like to do it, you can be more productive doing other things. But he didn't. I mean, we have in-house accountants now, but for years we didn't. And I got most of my information on how to read a financial statement and things like that from my banker. And it's kind of like you're saying, I think. There's people out there that will help really for free, or that you can pay. You don't have to own it all. And that's really more of a trend in business these days. Be careful what you bring in and want to own, because overhead may eat you up. You may be smarter to outsource it. It's still true, you know.
If we think of the entrepreneurial journey from the individual standpoint, if we think of the entrepreneurial journey as a journey of self-discovery, how important did you find in the early days of your companies that you know what you don't know?
I knew I didn't know anything to start with because I couldn't get anything done. I didn't know where to buy products. I didn't know where, I mean, I had to scour the, well, I'm going to say internet. There was no internet. You know, you had to scour the magazines and the little ads in the back to find out where to buy things and stuff like that. So I knew that I didn't know a lot about a lot of things. But I think, like I said, the biggest thing I didn't know was the importance of building a team of people. I didn't hardly realize that at all, except I thought it would be fun to do something with people you liked and enjoyed working with. That would be a great environment. And I think that's still what I've tried to create. But people that like what they do and have fun and are creative, and it's kind of relaxed environment. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't think I knew it all. I think, I'm not sure.
You have to learn to trust your gut, I think is maybe what you're saying. And I just think that comes with time. I'm a big gut instinct person, and I'll bring in all the consultants in the world and say, you know, analyze this, look at this, and they'll say, oh, well, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, yeah, I knew that. I mean, and so the quantitative analysis helps confirm, and then I just think over time, decisions become easier. And, you know, I actually sort of as a gauge, I told my husband, if I'm sitting here trying to justify a decision, then I probably shouldn't be, the answer is probably no. And so there's just trigger points where you just learn to, I think, recognize those in yourself. And
so intuition is big.
For me, it is.
Yeah, that's very definitely part of it.
I mean, I recognize that there has to be some logic as well, and so I don't ever go just strictly on gut instincts. But the further I get, and the less and less I'm surprised that my gut instinct lines up with the quantitative analysis.
One last question. Yes, sir.
Is it more effective to have a more interconnected team or a more segmented one? Like, should your sales team be communicating with your research and development, or your people working on the line be talking to the engineers who make machines, who build it, in that kind of aspect? Or is it more effective to have them stick each other one unique role?
We against having people in silos and not communicating. So, but there's certain areas that just have, like sales and marketing. I mean, they're just like oil and water, you know. But man, if they don't communicate, you got big trouble too. So, like, we're always trying to, you know, get those together, and you know, people work in silos in their department. And we all stick together. We don't like those guys. The shipping guys never get our orders out on time. We're always working to try to pull that back together. But there's probably some parts of the organization that don't have to relate really close, but we still get stuff from people maybe working in the back in warranty that say, well, those guys up there in sales and marketing, they don't have a clue what's going on, you know. So yeah, I don't try to keep people too separate, and there's some that it's really more critical that they interact.
What did we learn?
I mean, we jotted down a couple of things that from the beginning. One of Whitney's statements we wrote down were said it was important to learn from those you're trying to buy and soak up as much knowledge from your mentors as possible. Also, when you're starting out, your team your team will be working for you, but you also need to learn that you can learn from them as well. So you need to let your employees know that they add value to your company at the beginning to keep them motivated. And communication with the right people is essential for team cohesiveness. From Mr. Irby, we have, if you're an entrepreneur, you'll always be thinking ahead because you'll never know what situations will arise. You have to always stay ahead of the game no matter where you are at your company. You can't always expect to be the expert on everything, so you have to be able to bring people in who might be smarter than you, and then also kind of going into that, you have to learn to rely on your team when making decisions, because you might have one view, they might have another, but sometimes you have to back off and take their advice. And from Jack, one of the first things he said was, in the business world, trust between a team will be based on a common interest. So as an entrepreneur, you have to find that common interest for your team so that they'll move toward a common goal. Also, one of the more important things as a leader is you need to realize what your team members' strengths and skills are, and that way you'll set them up for success and it'll ultimately benefit your business in the long run. And conflict will always be inevitable when you're starting a business, but you need to learn, one of the most important things is learn which conflict will be constructive and will be destructive to your company, because both can either hurt or help you greatly.
Did he nail it pretty well? Okay. And you have something? So will you join me in thanking these three amazing